right, Amos 9:14. And I will bring again the captivity of my people of Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. And they shall plant vineyards and drink the wine thereof. They shall also make gardens and eat the fruit of them. This is the blessing that comes at the end. This is after all has been said and done. The punishment is finally over. God's going to restore Israel. He's going to bring them back. There's many pictures of this throughout history, but there can only be one fulfillment. Because he's going to go on, he's going to tell you, when I plant them, they won't move. That's where they're going to stay. Well, we've seen Israel go in and out and run back and forth and be kicked from this country to that country and try to regroup over here, and it's just never worked. There's going to be a time it works, and it'll be a final one. The permanent fulfillment, of course, is going to be the last one. The last time they get planted in that land will be the end. That's when they'll be planted. Ezekiel chapter 28. Ezekiel 28, verse 26. Now, most people will tell you that this is fulfilled now. I don't believe it's fulfilled now. Most people will tell you that when Israel returned in 1948, that was the fulfillment of this. But I don't think that's so, because we'll see in this verse right here that when God plants them, they dwell safely. The Antichrist is going to show up and they will not be dwelling safely. So that can't be the same planting. Ezekiel 28, verse 26. And they shall dwell safely therein, and shall build houses, and plant vineyards. Yea, they shall dwell with confidence, when I have executed judgments upon all those that despise them round about them. And they shall know that I am the Lord their God. All of those things have to be fulfilled for this final planning and the final end that he has planned for Israel. Amos 9, verse 15. Look at that. We did all the cross references I gave you. That's it. Amos 9:15. We'll make up for it on this one. And I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be pulled up out of their land, which I have given them, saith the Lord thy God. Okay, this is a final statement God makes on it. This is where they land, and that's their eternal dwelling place. There's no conditions involved in this. God is saying, I'm going to do it. Now remember, he's already promised to do this. Abraham was given the promise. His people would get the land. So at this point, it's not a matter of when he talked to the other patriarchs, he would always say, if you do this, I'll let you stay in the land. If you act bad, I'll kick you out. And so all of those things get fulfilled, but eventually it goes right back to the first promise he made to Abraham, and that one's got to be fulfilled. So the way that that gets fulfilled is a Calvinistic term, an eternal decree. Now, I don't mean it the way the Calvinists use it, but when God decrees a thing, it will be. And this is one of the things he's already decreed. And he set that thing up a long time ago with Abraham. Jeremiah 31 verse 40. Jeremiah 31:40. We know for a fact this verse has not been fulfilled yet. And the whole valley of dead bodies, and of the ashes, and all the fields unto the brook of Kidron, unto the corner of the horse gate, toward the east, shall be holiness unto the Lord. I don't think there's a spot in Israel called holiness to the Lord. It shall not be plucked up, nor thrown down anymore forever. Okay, that has to come after the tribulation. Because during the tribulation, they're going to be plucking and shucking everything they can find. So this one will be when Jesus Christ comes back, demolishes all of the enemies of Israel, and then plants them. And then they won't be plucked up forever. Look at 2 Samuel 7. Second Samuel 7, verse 10. We're going way back in time now. This is God making a promise that deals with this nation. Not our nation, the nation of Israel. 2 Samuel 7, verse 10. Moreover, I will plant a place for my people Israel. Okay, they're going to have a homeland. It's declared. God's going to give them one. And will plant them, that they may dwell in a place of their own, and move no more, neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more, as before time. Okay? That makes it clear. There's going to be a time that they are on top, and they're not going to be persecuted. That has to be after the tribulation. It's got to be millennium. Ezekiel 36. Ezekiel 36, verse 8. Ezekiel 36, 8. But ye, O mountain of Israel, here's somebody talking to an inanimate object. This mountain. That's the mountain of Israel. What is the mountain of Israel? It's got to be Jerusalem. The ye, O mountains of Israel, ye shall shoot forth your branches, and yield your fruit to my people of Israel, for they are at hand to come. That is, they'll be showing up any minute, so start producing fruit. This is what happened when Israel went into their land the first time. Remember the first time they came in there with Joshua. Remember they had all the way up until then been fed by manna. And then when they get into the land, God cuts off the manna. And he says, I've already prepared you houses that you didn't build. I got everything ready for you. He's going to do that with the land. The land itself is going to begin bearing fruit again. Anytime Israel's not in their land, the land itself becomes barren. If it were not that that the Jews were back in Israel right now, it would be desert like the rest of everything around it. The Middle East is desert. God's blessed one spot of that desert because his people are there. Not because it's some special spot as far as just the land itself goes. No, God's chosen a spot for his people, and he beautified it for them. Verse 9. For behold, I am for you. How about that? God's telling Israel, I'm for you. Now, I would feel that would be a tough thing to read if you were a Jew in Hitler's day. To read that, behold, I'm for you. Then why is everything falling apart? Okay, we got to get it in this proper context. And I will turn unto you, and ye shall be tilled and sown, for I will multiply men upon you, all the house of Israel, even all of it, and the city shall be inhabited, and the waste shall be built. And I will multiply upon you man and beast, and they shall increase and bring forth fruit, and I will settle you after your old estates, and I will do better unto you than at your beginnings, and you shall know that I am the Lord. Notice at the end of all of these things, it's saying, then you'll know I'm God. It's like, we'll cover this again in a minute, I think, but the Jews require something. The Bible has told us from the beginning, the Jews require a sign. That's the way he set the nation up. You know what happens if you require a sign before you believe? You've got to see someone do you good first before you trust in them. That's not what we have in our age. In our age, we believe without seeing. That's faith. So the Jews are going to have to go through all of these physical things and all of this stuff, and then they'll finally believe at the end. They don't get converted until the very end. Verse 12. Yea, I will cause men to walk upon you, even my people Israel. And they shall possess thee, and thou shalt be their inheritance, and thou shalt no more henceforth bereave them of men. Thus saith the Lord God, because they have said unto you, thou land devourest up men, and hast bereaved thy nation, therefore thou shalt devour men no more, neither bereave thy nations any more, saith the Lord God. Neither will I cause men to hear in thee the shame of the heathen any more. Ooh, I wish that was America he was talking about. But that's going to be one of those blessings, is that in Israel, it's going to be a safe place. You can count on it there. You're not going to be hearing all the cussing and the filth that goes on. Of course, you won't hear that basically in the millennium anyway. There will be some of it, and it'll be punished quickly and harshly. But it won't happen here in Israel. And that chapter is just a good chapter. You can read the whole chapter. Let's go to Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 8. Zechariah 8 verse 6. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, if it be marvelous in the eyes of the remnant of this people in these days, should it also be marvelous in mine eyes, saith the Lord of hosts. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will save my people from the east country and from the west country. So they've been scattered at this point, and he's saying there's a day I'm going to save them. And I will bring them, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God in truth and in righteousness. So he says right here, there's coming a day I'm going to bring all of these people back. I'm going to gather them back. Now, we've seen pictures of it. Right now, there is a picture of it. Most of the Israelites are in Israel. Well, I don't know about most. I think America still has as many as the nation of Israel does right now. But they're heading back there, and that nation is growing. However, it's just going to be short-lived. The Antichrist will be here soon. We'll be gone. The Antichrist will show up, that's right. And then they'll be dispersed again. They'll have to run for their life. You know, Jesus said, if you're up on your house, on your rooftop, you better jump down and start running. Don't go back in the house and grab your banjo. Just go. That's going to be important. Now, this is the way he ends the book is great. He's saying, Israel, you've earned some punishment. That's what we've been reading the whole thing. And now, right at the end, he doesn't leave us on depression and woe is everybody and there's no hope. He leaves it with, the hope is God makes a promise and he always fulfills his promise. The nation will be restored. National conversion really does not mean the same thing as their return. They will return, but they'll have to see the signs first. They'll have to see God do them good. Then at some point, God's going to grant to them salvation. It's not like in any other dispensation. He gives a blanket, he grandfathers them in. They automatically receive salvation nobody's asked for. And that's a wild thing. They're going to be brought back at the idea of it's a threat. They can't be safe anywhere else. God has come back at the Armageddon and destroyed everything. And they're scared to death. They don't know what to do. And I mean, we would be too if we were in their position. And God says, get back to your land. You know, the same way the Jewish Bible ends is 2 Chronicles, and it says it's the decree of, is that Artaxerxes there, who says, any of you Jews that want to go back to your land. And that's the way that's right where he's going to pick up when he comes back to earth for the Jews as the king of the Jews, is come back to your land. Look at it in Ezekiel 20 verse 34. Ezekiel 20 verse 34. And I will bring you out from the people, and will gather you out of the countries wherein ye are scattered, with a mighty hand and with a stretched out arm. Now, we Americans want to always think positive and happy, good thoughts. And okay, if you were in the right attitude, then that would be true. You would think those are good things. However, not everybody wants to come back. I don't mean to sound harsh, but the Jews are hard-headed. We found that early on. When the decree came that the Jews could return to their homeland and rebuild, and the king was going to supply them money and funds to do it, only a small handful went back. Okay, they're hard-headed. So we'll finish the verse. And with fury poured out. Whew. When God gets mad, things get done. He's coming back and he says, I'm going to bring you back and I'm going to plant you, and I'll do it with fury. You will or else. Find it again, Jeremiah 30. Jeremiah 30, verse 7. Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. This is, of course, a reference to the tribulation. Verse 8. For it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will break his yoke from off thy neck, and will burst thy bonds, and strangers shall no more serve themselves of him. But they shall serve the Lord their God, and David their king, whom I will raise up unto them. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with anything, but note that verse, verse 9. It tells you who's going to be ruling in the millennium. And David their king, go back one phrase. They shall serve the Lord their God, that's millennium, and David their king, that will be in eternity. I really should have gave you all the verses on this. You'll find other verses that'll call David the prince. David is a prince in the millennium. And in eternity, he is, the other side of that comma, David their king. He takes over as king. Verse 10. Therefore fear thou not, O my servant Jacob, saith the Lord. Neither be dismayed, O Israel, for lo, I will save thee from afar, and thy seed from the land wherein their captivity. Seed from the land of their captivity. And Jacob shall return, and shall be in rest, and be quiet, and none shall make him afraid. If you were a Jew, you would want to memorize that verse right there. None shall make him afraid. I feel for the Jews right now. They have everybody against them. They've got that Iron Dome that supposedly is, it catches 90-something% of the missiles that are fired at them. However, it's just a matter of time before that's given to everybody in the Middle East. And then it won't mean anything. Verse 11. For I am with thee, saith the Lord, to save thee, though I make a full end of all nations, whither I have scattered thee. Yet will I not make a full end of thee, but tribulation. I will correct thee in measure, and will not leave thee altogether unpunished. For thus saith the Lord, thy bruise is incurable, and thy wound grievous. There is none to plead thy cause, that thou mayest be bound up, that thou hast no healing medicines. Now, used to, you wouldn't read that and think anything of it. Nowadays, you can read it and it starts making sense. This junk they're giving everybody makes the medicines not work. And they keep pumping everybody full of different things. Like I don't know the last time I took a pharmaceutical. This last time we were sick, I got the Mucinex. And that's the lowest form you can get, not the pharmaceutical grade. And that helped. But the more of that junk you pump into your body, the less your body responds to it. And they're going to have the nation, the world, so full of junk like this that their medicines won't heal them. Now, God's going to fix it so they won't die. He wants them to be in a perpetual state of misery. They're going to ask for the mountains to fall on them, and the mountains are going to say, not today. And they're going to be in misery. Their medicines won't help them feel any better, but they can't die. That's a tough time. Verse 14. All thy lovers have forgotten thee. They seek thee not, for I have wounded thee with the wound of an enemy, with the chastisement of a cruel one, for the multitude of thine iniquities, because thy sins were increased. I don't hear anybody preaching on that verse. But that's a fact. That's who God is. He can be very loving, or he can be just the opposite based on your response to him. We understand that if you were talking about Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, the gods were very cruel. They're made-up versions. However, they were very powerful, and they were very selfish. Okay, well, they viewed that as being, that's what a god is, and you serve that god. Well, hello. That idea started from somewhere. God is totally just, totally righteous in all he does, and he doesn't have to answer to man for anything. Now, he's just. Therefore, you can find reason behind everything he does. But if you want to walk contrary to him, he says, I'll turn around and walk contrary to you, and we'll have this fight. Jeremiah 16. Yeah. Jeremiah 16:16. Jeremiah 16:16. Behold, I will send for many fishers, saith the Lord, and they shall fish them. And after will I send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and from every hill, and out of the holes of the rocks. Whew, that's God going after his own people. He said, I'm going to punish you. Now, that's the tribulation. That's the time that happens right before the blessing gets dumped out. Notice the two things that he sends after them. Fishers and hunters. Most of the time, now not down here. Down here doesn't, we're weird down here. Your good fishing happens as it gets cold. But if you're freshwater fishing, you want to do that in the summertime. That's a summer event. And you're going hunting in the winter. He says, I've got you covered all year round. Somebody's coming after you. And that'll be for 7 years. They will eventually be purged from the rebellion. God will have been satisfied. We see that it talked about God saw the travail of his soul and was satisfied. Of Jesus Christ when he punished him on the cross. He's going to do the same for the nation. When he sees enough travail, he'll say, okay, I've been repaid. We can stop this now. Whew. Good thing I don't live on a works-based system. That's a works-based system for you. And Israel was set up based on that. Hosea chapter 2. After he finally gets them back into the land for the final time, to set up the millennium, then he purges them. He takes away this rebellion. Of course, they've already paid for the time of rebellion, and now he's going to purge rebellion out of them. Hosea 2:14. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, and bring her into the wilderness, and speak comfortably unto her. Now, that's God calling his nation. He's going to allure her and speak comfortably to her. Now, that has to, on your timeline, you know where that's got to fit. That's got to fit after he's not been talking comfortably. The tribulation is not him talking comfortably. So that'll be the calling out that he does in the millennium to bring them back into their land. Okay, it's safe now. I've cleared all this out. There's no more bad guys. Y'all can come home. You know, sounds like a movie plot, doesn't it? Ezekiel chapter 20. Ezekiel 20, verse 38. Ezekiel 20, verse 38. And I will purge out from among you the rebels. Okay, so that tells me something. Some people will make it through the tribulation, will continue to be alive at the end of the tribulation, who are not righteous. Well, we know that's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen to them. And them that transgress against me, I will bring them forth out of the country where they sojourn, and they shall not enter into the land of Israel. And ye shall know that I am the Lord. It's just like, for us, we understand. Heaven is for perfect people. You've heard this is the way that sometimes you're taught to try to lead somebody to the Lord. Heaven is for perfect people. It's a perfect place. And only perfect people can go there. Therefore, you don't qualify. But you can get in the perfect person, Jesus Christ. And then you qualify. Now, that's true. The land of Israel is the same. He's going to beautify it and make it perfect. And according to our verse right here, any of the transgressors, any of the wicked people that made it through the tribulation and didn't die, he's not letting them come back into the land. Oof. He's discriminating here. Now, they will be converted, the ones that make it through and are righteous, the remnant. And that'll happen, of course, after he's already set them in their land. There's a process to it and a formula he's laid out. Romans chapter 11. The conversion has to be the last thing that happens. because they don't live by faith. We live by faith, so our conversion is the first thing that happens. And then we see his hand throughout our life. For the Jew, it's going to be the opposite. He's going to see God's hand and then recognize a sign and a wonder and then eventually be converted. Romans 11:26. 11:26. And so all Israel shall be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. Nobody asked for their sins to be taken away. He's just doing it. As concerning the gospel in this age, they are enemies for your sakes. They preach a different gospel that is not the gospel. But as touching the election, that's that remnant, they are beloved for the Father's sake. Therefore, he's going to purge away their sin. Not because they ask for it, just because he said, I'm going to do it. That's a new covenant. That'll be a new thing. We don't have any covenants. God never came down to any Gentile and said, I'm going to make a covenant with you and your seed after you, and then we decided that we didn't like his deal, and so then he had to make a new covenant with us. No, that only applied to one nation, Israel. God made a covenant with Israel. He's going to make a new one. He hasn't made it yet. Look at Ezekiel 36. Ezekiel 36:25. Yeah, we're almost done. I'll say that 3 or 4 more times. Ezekiel 36:25. Then will I sprinkle clean water upon you, and you shall be clean from all your filthiness, and from all your idols will I cleanse you. Idols, we don't think of idols nowadays, but there are a lot of idols in the world today. Of course, India is full of it. The more pagan the country is, the more full of idols they become. That's something, because America has been basically full of Christians. We've not experienced this idol business. Most other countries have. That's one of those things that's just an inbred into human nature, is to worship something that's not God. And the farther you get away from God, the less of a mind you have, and so you start thinking that the stick you just carved is God. And it's all over the world, and it's going to get worse. Verse 26. A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. Wait a minute. That sounds like salvation, doesn't it? Did anybody ask for this? Nope. He's just doing it. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and will give you an heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit within you, and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you shall keep my judgments and do them. Now, it doesn't sound too much like church age salvation, does it? Because we have to force those statutes and laws and judgments into our head and force ourselves to walk in them. He says there's coming a day though people won't have to do that. I'll just make it first nature to them. Verse 28. And ye shall dwell in the land that I gave to your fathers, and ye shall be my people, and I will be your God. All right, Israel finally restored. One more passage. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, one more passage. Hebrews chapter 8. Hebrews 8. Hebrews 8, verse 8. Hebrews 8, verse 8. For finding fault with them, he saith. Okay, he's found fault with them for 6,000, no, probably 4,000 years. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Jacob. That is, I'm not leaving anybody out. Verse 9. Not according to the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt. Because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. After those days, meaning after the tribulation. I will put my laws into their mind. We've never seen that. Now, we try to cram as many of them in there as we can, and they fall out all the time. The older you get, the more they fall out. and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. That's the end of this nation of Israel, is God's going to give them everything they could ever dream of and want, and he's going to change who they are so that they are perfect. That's pretty good. And that's all those verses you'll find in Psalms about his seed, that your seed will be blessed and your seed will serve him. And we can't say that in our age. I can't just say I'm saved, therefore my kids are always going to do right and always going to be saved, and no, my grandkids. No, we can't say that. The only way that works is right here. In the millennium it will work, because they'll be granted salvation. All right, that's the permanent restoration of Israel as a nation to the land God intended for them from the beginning. So that's the end of the book. We've made it through Amos, and now I'm going to give you a quick rundown on what's coming up next. The next book we have would be Hosea. And so here we are on the timeline. Amos is 760 to 753 BC. Hosea, the next prophetic book, is 755 to 715. I have, if you have this little book on Mesopotamia, this is not a full enough book. This just gives you the major Assyrian leaders. I have now completed it so that it covers every year of Assyria. And so here's where we are in Assyria. Ashurnarni the fifth is who's ruling. So the time period for the book of Hosea is 755 to 715. And so there's the Assyrian ruler, 755 to 744. So in Israel proper, the 10 northern tribes, here's the kings that are ruling. Jeroboam the second is just going out. Zechariah's in there. Shallum, Menahem. That's up north. In the south, it's Uzziah. He's been in the previous king, but then he'll die under this one. Okay, so this Assyrian that is ruling at the time, Ashurnarni, Nerari, that's it. Ashurnarni the fifth. He inherits supposedly a bad situation, you know, but that's, to me, that's a cop-out. I've heard so many presidents say that. I inherited a mess. Well, do something about it. Okay. Well, this is the way that history gets around for this guy. They say he inherited a mess. So the Assyrian rulership was limited by its influence because of court dignitaries. So he's got a bunch of corrupt officials in office. And of course that was common back then. Everybody wanted something for themselves. And there's the name Shalish, this guy right here. Shalusha. He was the commander. And this guy right here is probably trying to usurp the throne. And you find that a lot with Assyria. What was important in Assyria is when one king would go off of the scene, the next one had to dominate, or else there would be an all-out anarchy and somebody would claim that throne. So this is probably the commander-in-chief who, you know, the army generals, they wanted to be dictator anyway. And they had the force of the army, so they felt powerful. Okay, so according to some Egyptian canon, for 4 years the king was compelled to stay in the land. That is, he's got to put out fires at home. So he's not running around creating havoc in the rest of the nation. That's important to know. Because when Hosea comes in, Hosea is going to preach some tough stuff. We've just come out of Jeroboam the second. Jeroboam the second was the best ruling that they've ever had. As far as prosperity goes, they were on the top. After that, they're still under a little bit of peace because the Assyrian who would have caused problems has his own problems to deal with. Now, those won't last long enough, but it's customary for the kings of Assyria to campaign yearly. And, of course, that if the king is not on the throne, everybody is fighting for a position and stealing what they can grab, and they're pagans, so they're run by the other ruler, the god of this world, instead of any kind of righteousness. In 746 BC, a revolt breaks out, and the following year the throne is seized by the name you all know, Tiglath-Pileser III, who was probably the son or brother, or maybe he was some people say he was a general too. When you go back to these ancient sources, you find this. It reads a lot different than the Bible. Nobody has any definite answers. When you read the Bible, we know definitely because God's the author of that one. And he says this one happened and that one didn't. When we read this stuff, it could be this, it could be that, maybe it was this. We do know Tiglath-Pileser III did show up after the book of Hosea, and he also there's some debate on what his position was. However, we know that God mentions him. Therefore, we can connect that dot and say he was a literal person, a real person, and he really did rule in Assyria. And so we'll cover that when we get into the book of Hosea. I'm not going to attempt the book of Hosea tonight. That'll be another 40-lesson program. Well, maybe not that long. But that'll get us through the book of Amos, and there's your little intro to the Assyrian that we're going to be fighting under when we get into the book of Hosea.